And Keaton, this point I find interesting because this actually goes counter to so many things that I've been saying over the last couple of months with regards to perhaps we need somebody on the outside now to have distance who would be harder to reach, harder to corrupt, harder to threaten. And meanwhile, the Prime Minister of Jamaica is like, whoa, let's not rely on outside aid. We need to be able to do, the majority of this, if not everything, on our own. We can't be dependent because what happens if anything goes wrong with that foreign aid? Or rather, how could we just depend on foreign aid and then our own systems are just, porous, useless, etc.?
Well, the Jamaican Prime Minister made the point that international partners need to do more. But in that same breath, he also said, hold on, domestically, we need to do our part as well. He referenced the fact that AK-47s are no longer the weapon of choice in Jamaica, but Glocks and AR-15s are the weapons of choice in conducting crimes. And he alluded to the fact that they're manufactured in the United States. Now, as you are aware, there's an appeal going on for a lawsuit that includes some CARICOM members, Mexico and the United States, versus gun manufacturers. And I'm wondering if he was alluding to that legal proceeding with respect to international partners having to do more. In terms of international partners having to do more from a financial standpoint, one might argue that given from our geopolitical standpoint and the influence that the Caribbean could have on the wider world, for example, Trans-Tobago being a transshipment point, I'm wondering if he's also referring to more sea and border patrols from international partners such as the United States or such as Canada. But beyond that, the point that we've stressed on here on Talking Point, and he did mention it in his speech yesterday, which is ensuring that borders and ports are properly protected to curb the flow of illegal firearms. That point that he made is absolutely crucial because at the end of the day, I don't think it necessarily matters where a product is manufactured. It's how it's getting into our country that is the issue. Because border security has to do with us. Border security has to do with the government of the Republic of the Island. Border security does not necessarily have to do with the United States, with Mexico, with Suriname.
Right, yes.
If you're making the argument with how is it that these countries are allowing those items to leave their territory and make it to our waters, then those countries will say, in the same sense, it's how you're allowing such items to enter your territory. And it's how you're allowing these items to be a transshipment point. Because if I look at drugs, for example, drugs coming in from Colombia, drugs coming in from Venezuela, from Mexico, from islands to Trinidad, it's coming to Trinidad, then leaving Trinidad and Tobago. So the argument that I'm making is, at the end of the day, whilst you are arguing for international partners to do a lot more, quite frankly, we're not necessarily helping ourselves. And I don't think we've done enough as a nation. I focus more on Trans-Tobago, but it is a CARICOM symposium. So perhaps CARICOM as an entire body has not done enough to protect the Caribbean waters.
I mean, so I think my thoughts wasn't necessarily to get a lot of foreign assets. My thing was kind of similar to the concept of the film The Untouchables, where Elliot Ness gets a team together that he could be fairly certain isn't corrupted. No one is in the pocket of Capone because at the start of the film, it's not necessarily historically accurate, but the point is at the start of the film, his first attempt to get Capone is already undermined by the fact that somebody's taking bribes in the unit and Capone is aware of what's going on. So my thought is, to some extent, do we need people to conduct a certain level of investigation that we could have a degree of surety? Well, it's harder to get to them because it's not just corruption. There's also, you could utilize like a combination of both, like a carrot and stick approach where I threaten you to get you on the hook, and then once you're on the hook, now it's hard for you to be clean and to turn me in, right? So that was my thought. The use of foreign assets, I think there's just way too much Caribbean Sea to try to cover everything. The ports of entry are very obvious choke points where, and we're in control of that. We can't really give that to a foreign jurisdiction to run for us. That would be That would be silly. We're in control of that. Those are natural choke points because we know it's coming through here. We know that literally this very small dot, when we look at the map of TNT, this very small dot, we believe a significant amount of the guns and potentially drugs are coming through. And we still can't stop it. And if that's not porous, I don't know what is. And I don't know to what extent we could have the lawsuit in the States. And it could very well go in our favor because that's a very political issue. So what is law and what is desired might be two different things, right? Depending on the jurisdiction. But that probably won't solve the whole problem. Because at the end of the day, there will always be smuggling and crimes, and they'll figure it out. It might not be the same amount of guns, and it might not be as easy to get the guns here. But the guns, to some extent, will still come here. And I don't think we've seen the amount of guns that potentially have come into our borders. I don't think we've actually seen them be utilized in criminal activity, right? You only need a handful of guns, at least, rifles, to do the few crimes that we've seen. So that's what scares me. The amount that's coming in that we don't know about, that's estimated, is supposed to be in the thousands. But we don't even need the thousands. We just need a few dozen to get a good chunk of the violence that we see now. So I don't think that trial will solve the problems. What will solve the problem is if we figure out a way to clean up our border security.
I think also you have to ask yourself whether or not, and questions like this have been previously asked, and it's unsatisfactory answers that I've received, and whether or not TNT, we know it's a transshipment point for drugs, but are we a transshipment point for guns and ammunition as well?
Potentially.
And that's the thing. So it's also a matter of not what we're allowing in, it's also what we're allowing to leave. In 2023, if it is a question I'm asking, if it is easier to acquire an illegal firearm or illegal ammunition than it is to open a bank account, where are we as a nation?
Now, the one good news silver lining could be that might explain where the guns go to. Because it's not like we see thousands of guns being utilized to commit violence annually, right? Or tens of thousands of guns. I think the estimate is in the tens of thousands. So perhaps you're right. Perhaps we are a transshipment point for guns, in which case now we are part of other people's problems, not just for drugs. So again, the hypocrisy of us, trying to tell the gun manufacturers, hey, you all need to buck up. Meanwhile, we're aiding and abetting potentially stuff going on in Latin America. Because it's not as though composite North America manufactured weapons somehow were made there and are going north. They're coming south, if anything. So
I take responsibility, and I'm sure so do you, for what enters your home and for what leaves your home.
The law will have me take responsibility for it.
Precisely. So therefore, we as a nation and the government also has to take responsibility for what enters